Can't believe how many questions we've had about raising continuous soybeans, Brian. You know, it wasn't just a couple years ago everybody wanted to do continuous corn.
Yep.
Now it's continuous soybeans. And really, you know, if the market's going to dictate what crop you're going to plant, honestly, if you say, you know, I'm going to look and see what's going to be more profitable for my farm, because if the market says we really need more corn, well, then the price of corn gets kind of out of whack with everything else, like it did when it bounced up to $7. All right, all of a sudden, a lot of people started raising corn. Now, the price of soybeans is a little better economically than the price of corn when you figure out cost of production and everything, depending on where you're at. That some guys are saying, you know, maybe I'm going to go continuous soybeans. What are the considerations you should have?
Okay, well, the first thing is you got to look at these diseases. And even with diseases, I would lump in soybean cyst nematode. Really not a disease exactly, but still there are certain varieties more tolerant to it and everything. But rotation, crop rotation is really important when we do talk about diseases.
If I've got problems in a soybean field and I plant soybeans out there again, hey, those bugs that may have laid eggs in your field, the disease that could be in your residue, you know, all those kind of things are going to come right back into play next year, and they're going to be even worse than they were this year if the weather conditions are right.
So it starts with picking the right varieties. We want to make sure if you're in an area that has some soybean cyst nematode, you're looking at SCN varieties, tolerance to anthracnose.
Sudden death syndrome that we had this year, there's a number of different diseases that could come from one year and go right into the next and be even worse. You know, fortunately in the fall, there are some things that you can do, whether that's tillage to try and bury some residue, putting out contans to try and control some of the white mold sclerotia. And also, you may look at your nutrient program and say, all right, I had some disease issues. I was really short in manganese out in the field, and man, all of a sudden my plants are really susceptible to some things. I need to step up my game in my nutritional program.
So when you are raising continuous soybeans, that doesn't mean you put no fertilizer out there. Soybeans take a tremendous amount of potassium. They do take some micronutrients, and they take some phosphorus and some sulfur and some other nutrients as well. Another thing that you could consider would be throwing a little bit of nitrogen out, although if you're raising beans on beans, generally just having a good inoculant out there is enough, but sometimes we still run short on nitrogen.
Well, there's definitely a lot of considerations there. I think the other thing that we kind of started touching on a little bit was varietal differences. If a problem is going to pop up in a bean field, it's much more likely to happen in a continuous soybean field. So talk with your seed provider about those defensive traits that you're going to need for your area. Maybe it's root knot nematode, maybe it's soybean cyst nematode, or the diseases that we've been talking about. Just make sure you've got a variety that can hold up to all that.
As long as you do that though, then I guess about the next step is making sure you have great weed control. We strongly encourage you to use a good 3 pre-emerge herbicide program, because post-emerge, if you have Roundup resistant weeds, there's nothing much you can do that's very broad spectrum. Certainly you can switch to a Liberty program too, but the point is make sure you have great weed control, because when you start raising beans on beans, you don't have that other rotational crop, other modes of action in there that help control some of the Roundup resistant weeds.
Okay, just some last thoughts here. First of all, continuous soybeans or beans on beans can definitely be successful. There are guys across the country that are doing this on a regular basis and having very good luck. You just have to be diligent on your scouting program, be out in those fields, just knowing that, hey, there could be some problems that pop up. Definitely start with a good seed treatment to protect your seed, get it out of the ground, protect against early diseases and insects, and then just be ready with maybe an extra fungicide application early in the year if something like Septoria brown spot or another disease happens to pop up fairly early. Maybe it's frog eye in your area, depending on where you're at. Be ready to go out and pull the trigger early on that, and be ready with insecticide too if there are some bugs that are carrying over from last year's soybean crop into this year's crop. It may be something you need to address a little bit earlier.
And once again, it's very important to control weeds in soybeans, especially if you've got our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?